Guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. So before I get started, we do have the viewers pick of the week, so if you want to put your pick of the week in the comments below, you'll have a chance to be featured on the episode. Now, this week I had a pretty heavy haul, especially for the Christmas week. It's interesting to see that this year seems to not abide to the rules of, all right, usually we don't have as many comics during these 2 weeks. They're just making it like a regular comic week, which I find interesting. I wonder what was the mentality behind it and how that'll affect sales overall, or people will pick up their books after, or they'll pick up their books during the holiday season. In the comments below, let me know if you're picking up your comics during the holiday season, or you're waiting for it to build up until after the holidays. Now, let's jump into this week's comics. I believe I had 13 books. Yes, 13. Again, hefty haul. Number 13 for me is Batman vs. Robin issue 4. This is the penultimate issue of this event, and I loved Robin. I thought it was a really, really wonderful book, and I wanted to really like this. You know, I've been enjoying Mark Waid's run on the World's Finest book, which we're going to talk about later today as well, and I wanted to see where Robin's journey would continue, but I feel like This wasn't really a necessary book, and I continue to feel that way, at least as a successor of Robin. And I keep thinking about how Robin was a lot more character-driven than this series, where I just feel like there's not as much emotion here. Now, I know it's going to build into Lazarus Planet, I think it's called, which is going to be DC's next event, and I might pick up a couple one-shots from that, but I'm just not feeling this one as much as I want to, even though I think the artwork's pretty solid. I just feel like the emotions are a bit missing here. So overall, giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 13. Moving on to number 12, which is Dark Web Miss Marvel issue 1. I love Kamala. I don't really know what Kamala's role is within the Spider-Man universe. I think it's a weird place for her. I'm also still curious about that after I read this. We get a little bit of Kamala's adventures of just being Miss Marvel. Honestly, I think very similar to the television show. Kind of had a similar vibe to that. And her friends acting like, why are you working for Norman Osborn? And then you get a new character introduced, maybe a potential love interest, as the events of Dark Web are also happening. And I just don't really know if she fits organically into this world. I just want to see Kamala's stories, and I think that's really been what I have been disappointed with the character in the past couple, I would say, year or two. We really haven't gotten to see just Kamala being Kamala and seeing her adventures, which I think is more interesting than having her tie into something like Dark Web. Look, I'm happy to see her. I'm glad that she's not a character that we're not seeing, because, that could happen too, because she doesn't have an ongoing, but I just wish they'd find a better place for her, because I think Miss Marvel always works best when she is balancing, her day-to-day life with being Miss Marvel. And obviously, when you tie yourself into an event, it's going to be more superhero-driven than Kamala-driven. I feel like because it's tied into an event, her life and her world has not progressed as far as it was when she was with G. Willow Wilson's run, of course. So I've been a little disappointed with that. Overall, and also I thought the artwork was not very strong for this one. I think there's moments I liked, but some facial expressions were weird here. There's a moment with Bruno. I thought that looked a little weird. So overall, giving that one 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on, another event, and that is number 11 is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 7. This is the last issue to this event, and I feel like it kind of leaves you on a simmer here, because a lot of it was kind of already announced what was happening. I feel like with these type of events, they get a little convoluted. There's a lot of characters, so I think Nightwing was supposed to be the heart of this book, and you do get a little bit of that. But then you have Black Adam and, the Green Lantern's returning. So you have a lot of different things happening where the emotion is not really in these issues, especially when you're making Nightwing the heart of the issue. And then you lead up to moments where we kind of already knew where this was going, because it had to be announced for the dawn of DC, like the idea that Justice League won't be around, and maybe the Titans are going to kind of be the new Justice League here, which is something we have seen with DC Comics in the past. So I I just feel like this book wasn't original enough for me to be like, whoa, you got to get Crisis. And then it also didn't progress the DC universe enough for things that we didn't already know for this to be as shocking and moving as it could be. Artwork I thought was good. There's honestly some really good character designs here where it feels epic, but the actual story didn't feel as epic as that artwork. So overall, giving that 2.5 stars, and that's number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is Vanish, issue 4. I think we have a little bit of a hiatus for this book after this arc. But, this one I'm a little torn on with Vanish because I love Donny Cates' writing. I think he's such a brilliant writer, and I really like Ryan Stegman's art. I like the world that he's built here. I think his dark style really fits, and if you really enjoyed Venom, I think this is a great predecessor to that. But I also am not as interested in 90s Image, like this world of magic. And I feel like these past couple issues have been a lot about world building. We get introduced to new characters and not as much about the main character and his relationships with other people. We get a little bit of it with an ex-girlfriend he had, but it's mostly because it's about world building. And you get a slight cliffhanger with his wife, but I like that first issue the most thus far because it really focused on one thing. I feel like it's trying to build this world so quickly that it's kind of losing the strings of, okay, why should we care about these characters? And it's hard to rate this book too because I think the artwork is so great for this world building, but as someone who does like character story, I just wanted that a little bit more. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 10, I believe. Yes, number 9, we're moving on to a book I normally don't get, but it's more of a one-shot, and that is X-Men Annual, issue 1. I really like Firestar as a character, and what I like about her character, obviously the nostalgia I think is interesting, her power set, but mostly I enjoy that she's a character that's very separate from the X-Men normally. And even when she was introduced into the X-Men team, she didn't really want to be part of it. She's like, I don't really want to be part of this culture. And that's something I always enjoyed about Firestar, is that she's most known for teaming up with Spider-Man than being a mutant. And I wanted that a little bit more in this issue. And I think it did a good job at describing who she is if you enjoy her past. Obviously she's had a cancer story, which has been interesting. And just understanding who Firestar is as a character. But mostly this issue is like, hey, okay, I guess I am into this X-Men culture. And that's the end of the issue, which I'm guessing makes sense if you've been reading X-Men. But as just a Firestar fan, I'm like, oh, that's disappointing because I think it takes her uniqueness away. And I wish this issue kind of focused even more on Firestar. There's moments where they mention this is who Firestar is, or a more emotional character story, but then there's a lot of just X-Men fighting and dealing with the culture of Krakoa, which is the reason why I've kind of dropped every X-Men title besides Exterminators, which has been so disconnected to Krakoa and everything that's been going on there. I don't think it was a bad issue. I thought the artwork was pretty solid. I do wish there was times where the coloring was a little brighter, but overall giving this one 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is Batman, Superman, World's Finest, issue 10? Issue 10. I'm a little surprised this is lower than I thought it would be. I feel like it took a little while to kind of get to the point of this issue, but anytime the screen, the camera, the panel was on Boy Wonder, I enjoyed this book. I really like his morally gray character, and obviously him being abused by the Joker gets him a little angry, and rightfully so, but he doesn't really handle the situation as most superheroes would. And then you find out he is Mogog, I think is how you pronounce his name, a character I don't know much about. So when I found that out, I was like, okay, cool. I don't know if this affects me too much. And supposedly it could be connected to Kingdom Come too, which Mark Waid wrote. So I was like, okay, that's interesting for people that liked Kingdom Come, which, I've read, but it's been a long time. So I'm not, a hardcore Kingdom Come fan. But I think for people that love that world, it's like, all right, cool. I'm glad that's all connected. But yeah, I was a little disappointed with the reveal. But I do like the character still, and I like his emotional beats here. I just kind of wish it didn't take it till the end of the issue to do so. And I thought the coloring was a little darker than normal. And maybe that was because it's a kind of more of a Joker issue. But overall, giving that one 3 stars. I thought it was a little less exciting than some of the previous issues, but still a great series. Moving on to number 7, which is the penultimate issue to Nightwing issue 100. And that's Nightwing issue 99. And this is very much a one and done where we get to finally see a bit of Nightwing's sister and them deal with Zuko, the person who killed Nightwing's parents, and her kind of deliver the news that she is not his daughter and where that goes. It is I thought a little bit of a forgettable issue. I think it was an important issue for the relationship of the siblings, and obviously if you enjoy Nightwing's origins, I think it's an interesting issue, but I don't know if it really like punched me as much as it could have emotionally, like Tom Taylor normally does. And maybe because it's just a build up to issue 100 and wherever the new direction will be for the series. And I thought the artwork was pretty good. Obviously I love Bruno's art style. I think there's times where he's experimental, but there wasn't like a wow moment like he usually has with some of the action sequences. I think there was one interesting double page spread, but it was very similar to double page spreads that we've seen of him. So overall, sadly, I thought this was a forgettable issue, but I still enjoyed it, and I'm glad that we saw a different angle from Nightwing. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Rogue Sun, issue 9, a book I've been very much enjoying. And this one is definitely more of a point A to point B. If you enjoy the slice of life aspect of Rogue Sun, we just get to see him try to figure out who he wants to take to homecoming and get a little disappointed. All while he's trying to, figure out how to balance his life as Rogue Sun and still dealing with the idea that he's kind of living with this new family. By the end of the issue, especially the siblings, they aren't nice people, and maybe people that shouldn't be trusted, and what is everyone's motivations besides power. I do think last issue did a little bit better of a job of tying in the legacy idea and more of the Rogue Sun story, but I do think these were important elements to build these characters. I don't know if the high school dating aspect did that. I kind of wish we got to see a little bit more of him and his friend. I think that could have been a little bit more powerful from a character building aspect, but it's still cool to see that he is a high school student and he's dealing with these things. So overall, giving this one 3.5 stars. I don't think it was the strongest issue of the series, but I do think these type of issues are important to build an overall arc and narrative. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that's number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Stargirl, The Lost Children, issue 2. And I really liked how it kind of got to the point. I feel like with issue 2s, you sometimes get those slumps where it's like, okay, you just reiterated the information I knew from issue 1. But this issue does a really good job of progressing that story and also progressing the friendship of Miko and Courtney, where we get to see them go to the island that Miko was stuck in and how that caused her trauma, all while they're trying to save these children. And it's all tied into legacy and especially Courtney, playing with the heroes of the 1940s a lot of the time. It kind of connects to her. And it was just a fun issue. It was a good character-driven issue while still building this plot of, what happened to these kids and going into a really interesting setting, especially an interesting setting for Miko to be on this island, the island. And also just seeing the Green Arrow Cave I thought was fun, and it was a good issue. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars. Good artwork, too. I thought it really fit this style of narrative. So 3.5 stars, that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, and that is Goblin issue 2. I thought this issue picked up a little bit from issue 1, where, the artwork's still pretty dark, and that makes sense for a Green Goblin book. And this issue, we get to see him still dealing with the ramifications of having your sins erased and knowing all the bad things you did, now with a moral compass. But what I liked about this issue is that we actually got to progression with Queen Goblin. And we get to see that she has now embraced the sins of Norman Osborn. And I thought that was an interesting, twist. I don't know if it was like, oh my God, shocking. But it was an interesting thing to have for the plot. I was like, okay, this kind of progresses this plot in a new direction and kind of gives more character work for Green Goblin / Norman Osborn. And you do get to see him still being haunted by these other sins, which was interesting. So overall, I think this book has potential, and I'm interested to see where this plot's going. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 103. And I like the character-driven issues. I feel like that's the theme of this issue, or of this episode. But I do like when we get to stop for a second and not just fight Zords or fight with Zords and fight putties. We get to see a little bit more of the emotional ramifications of Rita becoming this bad bitch, We get to see Rita is a lot stronger and more evil than she once was, all while Matt's kidnapped and Jason is not a ranger anymore, and Kimberly and Aisha definitely taking it the worst. So I enjoyed seeing these character beats. I think I kind of wish that it wasn't just Aisha and Kimberly, the woman of the team, crying over Matt. And I think Aisha's romance with Matt was good in the last issue, but here just like it felt like they had to kind of remind us it was happening. But I do understand the emotions, especially from Kimberly, of why she feels the way she feels, and I like the angst that she has by the end, where she might do some morally great things to help her friend or to make sure her friend doesn't die. And I thought the artwork is just splendid. It's so good, so clean, and honestly reminds me of almost the action sequences of Dan Mora when he used to be on Power Rangers. I just thought the visuals were really good for this one. So overall, giving this 3.5 stars. I don't know if it was as strong as those previous issues, but I still very much enjoy the direction this is going, and I think the writer does a really good job at picking up the pieces from the previous arcs and really not feeling like it misses a beat at all. So giving that 3.5 stars, that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, more Spider-Man. There's a lot of Spider-Man that came out this week. Spider-Man The Lost Hunt, issue 2. I love the angst of this book. I really enjoy this Peter not having his powers, how Mary Jane's dealing with that, him going to a therapist, how that therapist is connected to Kraven, and just all the angst that comes along with it. It's a very dark book, just reminiscent of the famous Last Hunt volume. And the art is gritty. I like seeing Mary Jane and Peter together. I'm just really enjoying this era of Spider-Man and just feeling like there's new layers to it. It doesn't feel like it's treading water from that previous series. It feels like a successor to the previous series. Because how do you go back to such a legendary book? Like, how do you top it? You don't top it. You do something different, and that's something I enjoy. But it does feel like it lives in the era of the 80s and of that time of when it was written, which is great because it is the same writer as well. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, and speaking of Spider-Man, that's Mary Jane and Black Cat, issue 1. I really, really, really enjoyed this issue. I really like Jed McKay's voice on Black Cat. He's been doing it for a very long time, and I officially jumped on with Iron Cat. And it's really fun to see a lot of the tie-ins to his previous runs or even the previous one-shot and explaining a lot of, like, really following continuity, where it's not erased that one shot happened and Mary Jane was with Peter at that time. It's actually celebrated, where Black Cat is like, okay, well, how do I tell my friend that I changed my mind and I'm now with her ex? And all while you actually get some really good buildup from the main series of, like, one of the biggest questions and one of my biggest pet peeves of the main series right now is that nothing's really happening with Mary Jane. You get a lot of teases, and that's something we've been getting a lot in the recent years of Spider-Man, that there's a lot of teases of things we really want to see, but it takes forever to get an answer, and once you do get an answer, you're like, okay, I don't know if it was worth 40 issues of waiting. And I like that we actually get a little peek behind the curtain of what's been going on with Mary Jane, which I'm surprised by. I didn't know they would reveal in a tie-in compared to revealing it in the main series, where we get to see Mary Jane has powers. She does not want to talk about where they come from. But I like that. You know, I'm not against changing things. I don't know where this brings Mary Jane, but it kind of makes sense. You're like, okay, this is something that she's been hiding. And I like that it has nothing to do with Peter. And she kind of even says it here, where it's just like, no, this thing I'm going through has nothing to do with him, you know, like, it has to do with me. And that's kind of been a big arc of Mary Jane and why she's kind of pushed Peter away. And I like that a power arc is Mary Jane's arc and not just like, I got spider powers because, you know, Spider-Man was in the room and electricity blasted at me and now we both have spider powers. Like, no, this is Mary Jane's arc and her dealing with these superpowers and what she's doing with them. And I'm curious to see if that's going to connect to the main series. Is this part of why she left? And it gives you questions. It gives you some progression that we've been waiting for from that main series. So I really like that. And I just like their vibe together. They're friends, even though, you know, they have a lot of history with this guy that they both like or have liked. And I just enjoyed their bond. I enjoyed the action sequences with them. I just having a really fun time. And I just think it progresses the story really well. It ties into Dark Web well, explaining why they're here, but not feeling like you have to read dark web to enjoy this. So yeah, I just think it's a perfectly executed tie-in while telling a really, really good Mary Jane and Black Cat story that gets me very excited to see where this is going to go. So overall, giving that 4.5 stars. Artwork was a lot of fun for this too. It's just to see the different powers of Mary Jane was really fun. And just having Black Cat swing Mary Jane around too was a fun visual to see. But that's my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was. And the viewer's pick of the week from last week was The Amazing Spider-Man. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.